Hello, happy Monday. It's the final full week of episodes for this podcast before it goes into full off-season mode. I know I had the video on Saturday that went into the trades a little bit, about 12-minute video. We're going to dive more into that today. That video on the YouTube page is the most viewed video in the page's history. The channel has also had over 70 new subscribers in 48 hours. I can't thank everyone enough for just continuing to support this show. And, for all the new people, welcome. I do this every day during the season and 3 days a week starting next week when it's just, the free agency is basically calming down, I think, at this point. So, for today's episode, we're going to dive more into the two moves that the Penguins made over the weekend. Also get into why Ron Hextall is not close to done and a couple other things for this episode, including Pittsburgh Penguins filing for salary arbitration. I'll get into that, share my thoughts on that. So that's all coming up right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow the show's Twitter at LO. Arsenal Penguins. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline, as we cover this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. That is BetOnline, where the game starts. I'm fresh off just watching my beloved Juan Soto win the home run derby. There's a chance that he may not be here in a couple weeks. Sure. Do I really care right now? Absolutely not. And I'm feeling probably the happiest I've been as a Nationals fan this year. I know most of the listeners here are probably Pirates fans, but at least I can say that, I've seen the Nationals win the World Series with Juan Soto, and I know there's probably some dark times ahead, but that was great to see him win the Derby tonight. I always love watching home run derby, but let's get into the big acquisitions from this weekend. So Ron Hextall, went wheeling and dealing. He made some bold moves. I think the biggest thing, for what Hextall showed me was that, he was not happy with the blue line after that series against the Rangers. I think especially because, 3 straight games, 3-1 lead. You have the leads in elimination games, couple of them multi-goal leads, and you blow it. Game 5 against the Rangers at Matheson Square Garden, you have them basically done with 25, 26 minutes left. I know Sid gets hurt, but you let them right back into the game. 40 minutes left in Game 6 in Pittsburgh. You're up 2-0. Boom, let them back into the game. Game 7, multiple times, you're up at least 1 goal. You lose in overtime. And, sure, did you get bad goaltending in that series? Yes. But I just don't think Hextall was happy with how his defenseman played. And, that's, I think, the main reason why you saw some changes on the back end. I got to say, I did not think Mike Matheson was going to get traded this offseason. When I saw him going back in that trade, I was stunned. He had one heck of a year for the Penguins. He was their second best defenseman on the team. But, when you are getting someone like Jeff Petry, who, is a little bit older, is more expensive, but, he's a better player than Matheson. I've been seeing this take on social media, the Penguins subreddit, and yes, people still do go on Reddit. I've been seeing this take that, they're basically the same player and Matheson's maybe a bit better. I don't know where that is coming from. You look at the metrics for Petry this past year on a bad Montreal team. He was the better player. Heck, he had 21 points in his final 30 games with Marty St. Louis. That was on the worst team in hockey. He's in the 97th percentile for finishing among defensemen. Only 3% of defensemen are better than him with regards to that. He is an offensive machine. And, think about this. He's going to be playing probably a lot of minutes with Evgeny Malkin. That is going to be a huge help for, someone, who can get him the puck, pretty quickly, and someone who can also just create chances for him so that he can bury some rebounds in, or someone who can create zone entries, if Malkin's not able to, and then just give him the puck. Having him on that second pair for Malkin is going to be massive. So Petry, he is still a very good player. And, this is someone who was getting, Norris Trophy love last season. Before this year, when he was below 50% in shot attempts for the first time since 2014-15, last year with Montreal, when they went to the Stanley Cup final, when he was on the ice, the Canadiens had 56% of the shot attempts, 52% of the actual goals, 54% of the expected goals, 56% of the scoring chances, 54% of the high danger chances, and he was, still straight up in his mid 30s this year. I kind of blame that to him being on a bad team, but this is still a very good defenseman. And you look at the right side, Letang, then Petry, then Jan Rutta. And that's probably arguably the best right side in the Metropolitan Division. I would actually, ask people what right side of a defensive core is better than that one that the Penguins have. I would love to know from people which one is better. The left side, obviously there's a little bit of question marks there, but man, Petry is he is legit. I am okay with the Penguins getting out of Matheson's long-term belief. They still had, I want to say I believe it's 4 years at $4.875 million. I think when he was traded here, he had 6 years left. And, I wish Mike the best of luck. He wasn't that good his first year, but this past year, really turned it on, hit double-digit goals, I think, for the first time in his career. His underlines were really good. But, the biggest thing with Matheson for me is, can he repeat this in Montreal? He's going to be on a much worse team. He's not going to have Todd Reirden there to really, help him further his development along. I know he's going to have Marty St. Louis, who, I think is going to become a really good coach in the NHL. But, can he do this in an elevated role? Because I don't think Matheson is going to be getting bottom pairing minutes for the Canadiens next year. They're going to probably play him on the second pairing or potentially the top pairing. I would not be surprised if he did play on the top pair. From what I was told about the trade, I spoke to someone who is close with the team, and you all know me. I don't, I poke around a little bit. I find out stuff. Sometimes, other times I'm not able to find some stuff out, but I was able to confirm for you. I have a couple scoops here. Matheson had to be in this trade if the Penguins were going to get Petry. I was also told that the original offer for Petry was going to be Marcus Pettersson and Teddy Bluger. The Penguins, I think they would have rather traded Pettersson than Matheson. I think they wanted all three of Letang, Matheson, and Petry on offense for their defensemen next season. And then you can have, Jan Rutta as your stay-at-home guy, Brian Dumoulin, Ty Smith if he's in the lineup, P.O. Joseph. Some of those guys can maybe be, your stay-at-home guys, even though Ty Smith is probably an offensive guy, so that probably really wouldn't work. And then for Bluger, it sounds like to me, by poking around a little bit, the organization is not that high on him. He only has 1 year left on his contract. Right now, I don't think he's going to be back after this coming season. But that was what I was told the original offer was for Petry. It was declined. The Penguins had to, make it work in another area. And, to get a good player, you got to give up a pretty good piece. And the Penguins are able to do that. And I think this trade is going to pay huge dividends for the Penguins this year. Again, going back to my first point about how Hextall was not happy with the defensive core, say, let's go back to the game 7 here against the Rangers, right? So less than 6 minutes to go, you're defending a 3-2 lead. Say it's Jeff Petry along that wall right there with Marcus Pettersson, not John Marino. Is he going to pass the puck basically to the middle of the ice / the slot area and basically give it to Mika Zibanejad on a platter? No, he's not. He's going to rip that sucker right around the boards. And I think someone like Ben Lovejoy, if he were still with the Penguins, he would have done that too. That was just a really, I still can't get over how awful that play was from Marino. I'll say it till the day I die. The Pettersson helmet thing was definitely bad, but Marino's thing was worse to me. And I do not think Petry makes that mistake. And I'll say this, he also, he makes them a bit heavier on the back end, gives them more size. People do not want to hear this, but it's accurate. The Penguins, they were a bit soft in the defensive zone last season. They weren't that good in front of their net. They needed to get bigger and add more size to the back end. I love using analytics. I use them every time when I evaluate a player that comes to this team, when I'm doing season reviews and all that. But that said, you can't ignore the size and the heavy part of a defensive core. Penguins needed to get heavier, needed more size, and I think they did that with both moves, especially this Petry one. And I'm really excited to see him play here in Pittsburgh. The 3 years times 6.25 does not concern me in the slightest. That basically it goes until Sidney Crosby's contract is up. At that point, Malkin only has 1 year left on his contract. I think Petry will probably just either he'll retire at that point or he'll potentially just walk. So, I am not concerned about that. Excuse me, in the slightest. So, I'm a really big fan of that trade. I'll be diving a little more into Ty Smith coming up here in this next segment, but I can't say good enough things about that. I was definitely caught off guard when they did trade for him, and maybe I was overvaluing Matheson for a little bit, but I do think the Penguins are going to come out as the winners of this deal, in my opinion. So coming up here in this next segment, I'm going to get into a little more about Ty Smith's game and what he can provide for the Penguins going forward. But before we get to that, betonline.net is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is a continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. You can head to the website today or use your phone to learn more about the trends in action. That is BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, I'm back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at @LO_Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. The Penguins, they couldn't have made this trade without the first one, which was, of course, John Marino to the New Jersey Devils for Ty Smith and a pick. Marino spoke to the media today in New Jersey, and he said, he basically was expecting a trade because he'd just been, hearing the rumors for so long. And, I do like Marino. I think he was a very steady presence in his own end. The biggest thing, and I said it on my Saturday video, the offense just never came for him. 2 goals in his final 118 games. The Penguins only had 1 goal last year. I mean, that's not good enough. He had a great rookie year. And I think everyone, including myself, we were hoping that he was going to build on that. But, he took a step back. And I think the reality also is that this management group, Ron Hextall, Brian Burke, Chris Pryor and all them, they did not hold Marino in the same stratosphere that Jim Rutherford did. Rutherford loved Marino. He would always, every time he would speak to the media, either be on video or you're just reading it, you can just picture his eyes just growing so big when he was talking about him just because of how much he was infatuated by him. And, he got him for a steal from the Oilers. If it weren't for getting Marino, Eric Goodbranson would have been on the team. A couple of seasons ago, remember they had to move him before the season just because he had such a great preseason and training camp. But, I guess when the new management come in, they didn't see what the last regime saw. And I think that's part of the reason why the Penguins shipped him out. He still has 5 more years left at $4.4 million per. And the Penguins entered Ty Smith, someone who, he had a really good rookie season for the Devils. I really do think people forget about that. I'm loading up his stats here on National Stat Trick. He was very good for the Devils during the year, especially in the offensive zone. He played in 48 games that season. When he was on ice, the Devils had 53% shot attempts per 60, close to 500 in goals, but only 45% of those, about 50% of the expected goals, 52% of the scoring chances, about 50-50 in high danger chances, and then high danger goals for only 41% of those. But I also chalk some of that up to the Devils just not being good. But, definitely some good numbers there. But then, you could fast forward to this season, only 49% of the shot attempts for the New Jersey when he was on the ice, 40% of the actual goals, 48% of the expected goals, 49% of the scoring chances, only 26 high danger goals for, 34 high danger goals against. A lot of those numbers just, took a huge dip. And I think a good part of that is due to the Devils coaching staff just really not doing a good enough job with him. Lindy Ruff is, he's not a good coach, and he also runs a completely different system than what Mike Sullivan does. His is not as, up-tempo, fast-paced, speed skill as Sullivan's. And, I think that kind of system suits Smith's game a lot more. And I think there's a really good chance that you are going to see this player flourish in this system. He's definitely, I guess, a little bit of a project. He's still really young. He's on his ELC. I've been seeing people say that he might get sent down, and yeah, he is waiver exempt right now. Yeah, he can, I believe he needs 36 more games to have to clear waivers to be sent down to the minor league. So yes, they could send him down to Wilkes-Barre, but I personally think he's just going to make the team out of camp. And, maybe it's a little foolish for me to say that right now because there's still 2 months to go. But I do think he has enough talent, and, he's going to do a lot of work with Reirden and all those guys to, make the team out of camp. I see him potentially playing with either Jan Rutta on the third pairing or Todd Reirden, but probably I would say Jan Rutta. And again, I just mentioned Todd Reirden. I think he's really going to work his magic again here. Remember when Matheson came over from Florida, his transition stats weren't that good. He was just a mess in the defensive zone. We all know how gifted he was with the puck, but it was just a lot of the other parts of his game were just so terrible. The underlying numbers were not that good. And then you saw the work that Reirden did with Matheson the last 2 years. I really do think we might see the same, with this player. And, with Smith, the Penguins, they don't have a young defenseman like this in their system. I don't think enough people realize that. People will say whatever, but he is 5 times the prospect / player that P.O. Joseph is, and I think POJ is pretty good. But Ty Smith, you look at, again, I touched on this in my video on Saturday. You look at hockey prospecting and his NHLer probabilities, full comps. What's the top one? Scott Niedermayer, one of the best defensemen of all time. The second one, Michael Del Zotto. I don't think he'll be like him, but Tyson Berry in there, Paul Coffey, Dougie Hamilton, and then you have the other comps for star probabilities. 91%. He has a 91% chance of being a star defenseman in this league per this model, and it usually is pretty good when it comes to predicting success in the league. The 5 full comps, Ryan Ellis, Paul Coffey, Zach Bogosian, Cam Fowler, and Brian Berard, some very good company in there. And we already know how good he is at moving the puck up the ice, has a nice shot, good at taking the puck out of the defensive zone into the offensive zone. But if he can clean up some of those mistakes in the offensive zone, in the defensive zone, he's going to be, I think, a player for this team for years to come. I was definitely not as high on it when I initially saw the deal, because I was like, wow, like this is all you're really getting for Marino. And sure, could Smith not live up to those expectations? Absolutely. I mean, he's still on an ELC, for God's sakes. But I'm just telling you all like what the potential for this player is. He has a very good chance to be a star in this league. And hey, thinking about out loud, Chris Letang just signed his final contract. Could he be the next top defenseman for this team 4 years to come down the line? I don't know if the Penguins are thinking about that right now because he hasn't really played a game for them yet. But, maybe in the back of their mind a little bit, it's like, wow, maybe we just, found our potential next franchise defenseman, from the New Jersey Devils. And again, who knows if that happens? I'm putting that out there just for kind of the sake of it, but, who knows? I think if he does turn it around next season and, is coached up a little bit and, is polished up as a player, I think this is going to also work in the Penguins' favor. And again, I really like the defensive core next season. A top 4 of Dumoulin, Letang, especially if Dumoulin bounces back. Pettersson, Petry is very good, assuming Pettersson does not get moved. And then you have the potential bottom pairing of Ty Smith and Jan Rutta, and maybe you move POJ for a pick, or maybe for a bottom 6 forward or something like that. Rubido and Friedman, I would say, are probably your number 7 or number 8. But at that point, well, just Jan for some reason there. But I think this has the makings of a very strong and deep defensive core. And I'm really excited to see, how they look for next season and, just overall what Mike Sullivan does with the pairing. So that's all fine and dandy. But coming up in the next segment, I'm going to tell all of you, Ron Hextall cannot and will not be done. So stick around for that coming up here in this final segment. All right, I'm back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Also follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. So I saw some people were, a bit upset on Monday morning when Hextall went on to 93.7 The Fan. I think he was with Colin Dunlap and Chris Mack, the Fan Morning Show is I think what they call it. And he was asked about the forward group, and the first guy apparently he immediately mentions is Josh Archibald of all people, and whatever. I mean, that's honestly what I can say when he's just piping up the forward depth here. It doesn't matter if it's Archibald or anyone else that's currently on the team. I literally will say whatever. This is we're not in the Jim Rutherford days here where he's going to have everyone sit on his lap and he's going to be like, hey, what would you like for Christmas, son? Because he would announce to everyone what he would do. If you were to ask for a wish, he would grant it, because that is who Rutherford is. For Hextall, he keeps things very close to the vest. He is not going to come out and say what his plan is. He's not going to also come out and trash the forward depth. I think Doug Glack, who's come on this show before, he said it best on Twitter a couple of days ago. Hextall said, oh, I like my current group about 5 or 6 times a week before they traded for Rickard Rakell. Okay. Like GMs, they say that to save face. They're not going to reveal what they're actually doing. And, and they go out and make moves. I got to think Hextall is not happy with the forward group. The work still remains for this team. Right now, in terms of their depth, they got Jeff Carter, Kenny Bluger, Brock McGinn, Josh Archibald, if he's going to be in the lineup, and he probably shouldn't because he's just a fringe NHLer, Drew O'Connor, and Radim Zohorna. I mean, that's just, just put it lightly, that's garbage. To be honest with you, that's not nearly enough. If you're relying on half of your bottom 6, who are basically unknowns at this point, to all of a sudden just produce after, someone like Anton Heinen had 18 goals last year, Evan Rodriguez had 20. I'll repeat this again. The Penguins still have to replace 40 goals from their bottom 6 next season. And, plenty of time to get that to happen. I'm not trying to get everyone to panic, but, if he were to go into training camp and he hasn't done anything to replace those 2 players, I think that would definitely be something you can criticize him for. I think that's honestly some malpractice, in my opinion. What I can tell you all, though, from what I've been told by this same person who, has not failed me before, is close to the team, he said to me that, the Penguins, they would like to trade for a winger for Evgeny Malkin to potentially slide Jason Zucker down the lineup. That's probably the last scoop I have for you all today. I don't know when I'm going to get my next one. Don't ask for them. I've probably had 2 scoops in my life, if that, while doing this show. So, I can try to find out stuff at times, but this person DM'd me this without even, this person told me this without even me asking or anything. So thought I would put that out there. He cannot and he will not be done. At the end of the day, they have 2 months to go until free agency. There's some good options out until free agency, until training camp. Excuse me. Jeez, I don't know what is going on with me these last couple of minutes. I feel like I'm just stumbling over my words. 2 months to go until training camp, and sometimes, these deals come together a bit later in the offseason. Remember, 4 weeks into the 2016 offseason, you saw the Brandon Sutter plus trade for Nick Bonino, and that just basically came out of left field. Then they signed Eric Fair 5 minutes later. Sometimes it takes a little longer to make the trade or sign the player that you want to sign, just because, they're on different schedules. You got to make the money work. We're 5 days into the free agency, and Nazem Kadri and John Klingberg haven't even signed their contracts yet. Nino Niederreiter hasn't either, and I would love for the Penguins to go after him, to be honest with you. So, all I can say to everyone, patience. I think he's going to have something up his sleeve here. I do think they are going to make a move for a forward or 2. I think they're going to add at least 2 more forwards. to this team. And, maybe one of them is bringing back Danton Heinen and Evan Rodriguez. Maybe another one is via trade, which is, what I just told you. I think the Penguins, they do want to get another winger for Malkin to slide Zucker down the lineup. And, maybe that also involves one of the defensemen going out, whether that's maybe Marcus Pettersson, though I don't expect that, P.O. Joseph, someone like that, because I don't think they're going to go into the season with 9 defensemen. I mean, Hextall said it 5 days ago. He's like, yeah, we're probably not going to do that. Changes his mind a few days later, whatever. It's, again, he's not going to really tell you what he is going to do. It's just basic GM speech. Take everything he says at this point with a grain of salt. So that'll do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I appreciate all of you listening to this one. Let me know what you all thought in the YouTube comments. You can DM me on social media, all that stuff. I'll be back with another episode for you all on Tuesday. So hope you all enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your Monday, and I will talk to you on Tuesday.